And it's another Monday coming down. Another Monday morning here, midday, 9:05 Central Daylight Time. Millennial Mac, did I pop the microphone with a plosive? Right there, that's a plosive, not a Pelosi. Did I do like a little mic pop a second ago? I did not mean to.
It's a Monday. It's a Monday.
It's a Monday. I in no way want to denigrate my posture as a professional radio announcer, or at least a guy who dabbles in this from time to time. Recovering Congressman JD Hayworth back with you. 615-737-9986. 615-737-WWTN. Millennial Mac always in to help me help myself and to help you, the listener, make this an enjoyable listening experience. Next hour, so the federal judge issues that, just strikes down the drag show ban. It's so easy to see how the left gets to label stuff, because some of the things they come up with a short thing that doesn't make sense, like down in Florida, when you're not going to have little kids introduced to insert part A into another person's part B and all that hoo-ha. Somehow they, and the press obliged them, why, it's the Don't Say Gay bill. But next hour, we will get into the drag show ban, which was entirely age appropriate, and you won't be surprised to hear a local state senator basically classify anything designed to protect the innocence of children as hate speech or motivated by hatred. But that comes next hour. Now, first we turn our attention this morning from Middle Tennessee to what used to be the Middle Kingdom. It was called way back in ancient times, or maybe about the time Marco Polo and those guys paid a visit. That would be China. I've been thinking some based on the latest foreign trip by one of Biden's fellow geriatrics. We are going to compare and contrast a China doll with a China dope. And we do so in unorthodox fashion by remembering a 3-word title. And you can forget all about it. Yeah, forget all about babes in Toyland. There is nothing infantile about the manufacturing, marketing, and merchandising of toys. Instead, the economic stakes are so high, profits in excess of $100 billion a year, that American industry executives tie themselves in knots. Not unlike teens in the mid-'60s, contorting themselves in a fashion demanded when playing the Milton Bradley game Twister. Boy, that was a game. I think it's still played. It can result in good touch and maybe not such a good touch. At any rate, this modern-day contortion is prompted by a market distortion. As is the case with so many manufactured goods, 80% of the toys sold in the USA are made in China. Yes, Virginia, there may be a Santa Claus, but panicked American companies have not only deprived Santa's elves of their annual assignments, they have eliminated U.S. jobs and given a gift to themselves: cheap Chinese labor. In return, the Chinese have gifted our nation with something even worse than fewer and lower-paying American jobs. Why, they've declared a people's war on the United States. And even before the bumbling of the Biden administration, which appears at this point to be something far more sinister than mere incompetence, the Chinese dragon was breathing fire on the tails of the imperialist running dogs, in the parlance of Chairman Mao. American industrialists have been indulgent of imperious behavior by the Chinese for quite some time. In 2007, after recalling 21 million toys, count them, 21 million toys made in China, toy maker Mattel actually apologized to the Chi-Coms. The reason for the recall? Well, excessive levels of lead paint found in Mattel toys manufactured in China. Amazingly, Thomas Dabrowski, then Mattel's executive vice president for worldwide operations, put the blame squarely on his company, not the Chinese. Quoting the Veep now, Mattel takes full responsibilities for these recalls and apologizes personally to you, the Chinese people, and all of our customers who received the toys, end quote. Who was the you to whom Dabrowski directed his apology? Well, that would be the Chi-Com's product safety chief at the time, Li Shenzhen. Notwithstanding the fact that Li was probably more familiar with Stalin's 5-year plan than with the dynamics of a free market. No matter, Li's response made it clear that his mission was that of a communist Chinese political hack. Quote, you cannot recall 10,000 products just because one is substandard. That is unacceptable, end quote. Oh, really? Li's argument might have carried more weight if in that same year of 2007 there had not been many other recalls of other products made in China. Let's go down the list. In August, the month before the Mattel thing, in August there was a recall of toothpaste for containing a chemical used to make antifreeze for automobiles, and even earlier that year, in March, there was a recall of dog food as thousands of American pets were poisoned fatally. More recently, a popular blood pressure medicine made in China was recalled. In 2018, the generic drug valsartan faced scrutiny after the FDA said it might be contaminated by NDMA, a carcinogen. Now, 5 years after the anti-hypertensive medication scare, well, the PRC is trying to find another way to lower the blood pressure of Americans. It seeks more favorable treatment worldwide, and it's trying to get there via entertainment on the silver screen. Warner Brothers, the studio behind Barbie, the live-action motion picture about the all-American doll and female ideal, finds itself embroiled in a less-than-ideal controversy. The concern is focused on a map that appears behind Margot Robbie, who plays Barbie, and that map depicts the 9-dash line, which Beijing draws more than 1,000 miles off its coast, claiming the vast majority of the South China Sea as its territory. Would it surprise you to learn that Barbie dolls are made in 4 foreign factories? 2 of them in China. And again, Barbie is manufactured nowhere in the USA. Now, Hollywood being Holly weird and being Holly left, a Warner Brothers spokesman sought to belittle any American concern, saying, quote, the map in Barbie Land is a childlike crayon drawing. It was not intended to make any type of statement, close quote. Meantime, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen made a point that spoke loudly and clearly without words. Maybe you saw this yesterday in the video. Visiting Beijing, Yellen bowed to her Chinese counterpart, Vice Premier He Lefeng. Or is that just He Lefeng? I don't know. Do you think they're listening? But old Janet, she bows once, she bows twice, she bows thrice. One commentator said Secretary Yellen looked like Dippy Bird, that non-Mattel-made toy that dips its beak into a cup of water again and again and again. So what you have is the spirit is the spirit of 76 years of age. Old Janet Yellen. What was that Don Imus said about Madeleine Albright? She looks like she ought to be changing sheets over at the Red Roof Inn. Well, poor Janet Yellen. She looks like someone you know. I want you to stop and think about that. Now, I'm not talking about in your intimate circle. I'm talking about from a 60s sitcom. And I'll fill you in on that shortly. But now we have to face the fact that Janet Yellen is the latest from the Biden bunch to show up as an appeaser in a communist land. No babe in Toyland she, just a septuagenarian in Fantasyland. What is it? As I have said repeatedly, this was way back before all the hoo-ha started with the Russian hoax and Donald Trump. I pointed this out during the age of Obama, maybe even a couple of times when I was serving in the Congress of the United States. Wouldn't it be great if the left treated the enemies of this nation the way it treats Republicans? Now you can say, well, wait a minute, JD. Look at what Biden's doing over there in the Ukraine. Oh, did you hear about that? Oh, mercy. Biden, of course, went to the beach over the weekend before climbing aboard Air Force One. He is now in the UK, and he's supposed to meet with King Charles. And, Charles is a younger guy, seemed to have it together, and then he went, what's that marvelous four-letter expression? Millennial Mac, you probably know it. King Charles, when he was Charles, Prince of Wales, somewhere along the line, he went daft. D-A-F-T, especially about the climate. So what are the two heads of state going to talk about today when Biden shows up at Buckingham Palace? Why, they're going to talk about climate change, which is why, by the way, there it is, right on cue. Thank you, Millennial Mac, which is why you see all the stuff on the Drudge Report about the place where I hang my cowboy hat. Scottsdale, Arizona, swimming pools, movie stars, and heat. But remember, it's a dry heat for at least the next week. We're about time for monsoon season. At any rate, they're counting now. Will the Phoenix area have temperatures over 110 for 18 straight days? To do so would be a record. And you know what kind of yin yang's going to start? Hey, climate change. But rather than the climate, let's talk about the shooting war between the Russians and the Ukrainians. Daughter and Joe, I guess, was headed out to Marine One. It was somewhere where the press gaggle shows up. Somebody asked him about cocaine at the White House, and he talks about, well, Ukraine, they don't have any ammunition, and we don't have any ammunition either. What? Yes, when it comes to being proud custodians of our national security, old Joe, he just don't know. When we come back, Janet Yellen in her own words, and then we let you in on the little mystery. Who does Janet Yellen look like and resemble and talk like in a disturbing fashion? It's JD.
The former U.S. gymnastics doctor sentenced to federal prison for sexually abusing gymnasts has been attacked at said prison. Here in Tennessee, a soccer coach is in custody accused of drugging and raping kids and recording it all. These stories and more at 9:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Mercy, Ken will have those sorted stories for us. Not assorted, but sorted, S-O-R-D-I-D, stories for us in less than 3 minutes' time. We'll try to, well, this is one of those deals where you got to laugh to keep from crying. Janet Yellen has about as much business being Secretary of the Treasury as I'll use a metaphor that legendary World War II ace Joe Foss used when he cleaned up his language. Janet Yellen has about as much business serving as Secretary of the Treasury as a kangaroo has driving a sports car. Gee, it's tough to do those squeaky clean metaphors. Anyway, so Face the Nation on CBS with big-time leftist cheerleader Margaret Brennan. I don't know if she's kin to Walter. Walter was the real McCoy, and Margaret Brennan is a genuine leftist. And so they put Janet Yellen on yesterday, and she says, man, things were just great. What a wonderful visit to China. Clip 1.
Well, what I can tell you is that I had a very constructive visit. I received a warm welcome and had very substantive series of meetings.
Oh, that's very good, Janet. It was a big success. Now, you look at Janet Yellen, especially the way she puffs out her cheeks when she's trying to remember something. And there is a figure in sitcom history. Remember Bewitched? Maybe millennials like Mac don't, but those of us reared in the baby boom remember veteran actress Marion Lorne as Aunt Clara. And this was back in the days when you didn't have a name for old folks getting old. Aunt Clara was like, Janet Yellen. And in this scene from Bewitched, a judge is asking Aunt Clara a question that really should be asked of Janet Yellen and Joe Biden, for that matter. Take a listen to cut 2.
Do you believe that you are a competent person?
Oh, of course. But there's some things I don't do as well as I used to. Not at my age. Who does?
Yeah, there it is, a million laughs. Well, lovable Aunt Clara, Marion Lorne, she was an actress. She was acting. Janet Yellen, Joe Biden, and others in that fossilized group, they aren't acting. Just somebody's pulling their strings. When we come back, one of the smartest guys in Washington, I mean that as a compliment, analyzes the mess that Yellen walked into in China. But right now, it's news time. It's JD Hayworth on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
"9:30 on the dot this Monday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories, and we've got a crash that might affect your timing at the airport. The right 2 lanes of 40 westbound are blocked right there at the International Airport. Full forecast in 2 minutes. Former USA gymnastics Dr. Larry Nassar is reportedly in stable condition after getting stabbed by another inmate at the federal prison in Florida, where he was sentenced for sexually abusing female gymnasts. Here in Tennessee, a Franklin soccer coach is accused of drugging and raping kids and recording it all. Camilo Hurtado Campos was arrested June 23rd after police say he left his cell phone at a restaurant, and workers discovered the images when they tried to open the phone to learn about the owner to return it. And an appeals court has reinstated Tennessee's total ban on minors receiving transgender care. At least for now, it's an injunction blocking a lower court ruling that said parts of the ban are unconstitutional. And homes are being swallowed up in California landslides. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
One of the big words being thrown around in the investing world right now is this one. You may have heard it. Fiduciary. The idea that the investment advisor has to keep your interest first when they give advice. Now, it's being used in a marketing sense right now, and one of the things that I found fascinating, there was a study by the University of Southern California and Indiana University. They looked at investment advisor portfolios and they found that they were making basic academic mistakes in the management of their own portfolios. And the question that they asked was, if they can't even keep their own best interest first, how are they going to keep your best interest first? That was the question. Now, one of the things that we do at Paul Winkler Inc. is every one of our offices, 10 offices, is run by a degreed planner, number one. But we go way beyond the call of duty when it comes to fiduciary and making sure that we're using academically sound principles in investing. Evidence-based. In other words, a lot of this is backed by Nobel Prize winning research. To learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
22 minutes in front of 10. Following the news at 10, the drag law ban and what a couple of state senators, one on the left, one not only on the right, but in the right, what they had to say to ABC2 about the federal judge's decision that some aspects of the statute duly passed by the legislature and signed into law by Governor Lee, well, this judge says, some of this is unconstitutional. All of that following the news at 10. 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. And if you want to be candid, if you get your courage from the keyboard, you may contact me via social media, linkedin.com. On the search feature, type in J.D. Hayworth, Hayworth. And then you can send me a message that'll be just between us, but not for long. So that's that. Now, it won't surprise you to hear that during my time on Capitol Hill, and we all have blind spots, and goodness knows they ran this guy through the ringer. Though nobody has been run through the leftist media Democrat ringer of insults like Donald John Trump, this guy got a pretty big dose of it after he led Republicans to majority status in the House of Representatives for the first time in 40 years in the midterm elections of 1994. How bad was it? Well, I was 36, and when I went to serve in Congress following those 94 elections, first time in my lifetime, Republicans had a majority. And we would get together with Newt on Thursdays because he was very perceptive politically, and we rather immodestly called ourselves the majority makers. And so we'd have lunch with Newt, and we'd talk about legislation and talk about history. I will never forget his two-word description of what made Ronald Reagan so unique. Cheerful persistence, Newt said of Reagan. Reagan never let the so-and-sos grind him down. There was always that smile and, well, there you go again. He was not indulgent of those who would insult him.
David Gergen, the guy who was his advisor and then went over to advise Clinton and kind of would switch sides like a weather vane. Gergen said that he really thought President Reagan should visit with
what passed for an elder statesman of the Democrat Party, Clark Clifford, or as Tom Brokaw might have said, Clark Clifford. Clifford had called Reagan an amiable dunce. And when Gergen suggested that President Reagan have the aforementioned Clark Clifford into the White House, Reagan looked at him and kind of went, nah, we're not going to do that. Yeah, why bother? All this stuff, what the only thing the left can say is, well, he was optimistic. Oh, he was a lot more than optimistic, but cheerful persistence distinguished Reagan from every other leader or wannabe leader of his time. Now, Newt shows up yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures on Fox with the money honey, Maria Bartiromo. And old Maria B., she has got, boy, they must do a pre-show lip pump-up because she's always got to do her essays and have those full lips and stuff. But she was getting shrill, and understandably so, with the crap going on between the Biden bunch and communist China. So Newt comes on, and as a historian and as former Speaker of the House and as a guy who ran for president his own self, well, Newt lays it out. When it comes to Biden and his bunch, they are B-A-D bad. Let's take a listen to cut 3.
The Biden administration is either corrupt or lives in a fantasy land. In either case, it's dangerous to the United States. If Yellen actually believes what she's saying, she's in a total fantasy land. And when I watch, for example, the Secretary of State, who'd been paid, I think, over $1 million a year by the University of Pennsylvania with money which I think came directly from communist China, I'm not particularly reassured. So I think whether it's on a fantasy front or a corruption front, the Biden administration is enormously dangerous to the survival of America and an enormous asset in the creation of a Chinese communist dominant system. I think it's enormously difficult.
Yeah, and as he said, incredibly dangerous. But their old daughter and Joe goes. Wow, what foreign policy chops Biden has. Wow, what a guy who brought us together. Oh, gee. Now, appearing along with Newt on Maria B's Sunday Morning Thing was former LA Times reporter and China expert Gordon Chang. And Gordon, you may recall we heard from him last week, but he fills out the whole thing here talking about what she was up to the day the cleaning lady who doubles as our Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, showed up in Beijing. This is clip number 4.
On the same day that Janet Yellen arrives in Beijing, you have Xi Jinping giving one of his let's go to war speeches to the Eastern Theater Command of the People's Liberation Army, the command that will actually launch the invasion of Taiwan. And on that same day, which was Thursday, you have China trying to seize Reed Bank from the Philippines in the South China Sea. In other words, trying to pick a fight.
This really adds to the Monday morning blues, does it not? I mean, this stuff with China, no, they ain't 10 feet tall, but it's just that our bunch, when they aren't engaged in, taking orders from China, the gerontocracy in the Biden administration, they have 1.5 feet in the grave. And so Gordon Chang continues assessing the Chinese view of, Secretaries Yellen and Antony Blinken, no truth to the rumor that he's part of the firm Winkin, Blinken, and Nod. This is cut 5.
As the speaker says, this is going in the wrong direction. We sent Antony Blinken to China. The Chinese humiliate him. We then send Janet Yellen. She humiliates herself. This is really, really bad stuff.
How bad is it? Well, take a look at our southern border. The Chinese, the ones that we're counting, and of course they're waving them on through, but the ones that have been counted coming across what used to be a border, what's now just basically opened up. Come on in, y'all. Close to 13,000 Chinese nationals this year, an increase exponentially from previous years. And Gordon Chang concludes that most of these folks are coming and mean us harm. Take a listen to cut 6.
Directed to come and stay in America until further word.
Both. First of all, we're seeing desperate middle-class Chinese. These are generally not poor people because they can afford to pay $35,000 a head to the Mexican cartels to bring them in. But among them are packs of males of between 5 and 15 who are of military age, not coming with family groups, pretending not to speak English, and engaging in Chinese military rituals like drinking blood. A border section patrol chief said that some of them are known to have Chinese military affiliations. So clearly these are saboteurs coming into America to wage war on the United States on the first day that there is war in Asia.
Well, now, if you're going to dismiss Gordon Chang as a quack, I would argue against that. Even if it doesn't exactly turn out like he says, and by the way, he cited eyewitnesses who saw the deal with some of these guys. The ritual amongst Chinese warriors is they grab a chicken and they drain the chicken of its blood and they take a drink. And you wonder how COVID got started. Well, no, COVID, of course, is a bioweapon of its own. Here's the deal. China will use just about anything as a weapon, including that China doll who you and I have called Barbie for so many years, which we talked about earlier. So it's just a matter of time, is it not, when the Chi-Coms attack Taiwan? So what is their angle, as Mitch McConnell would say, what's a long view? Since the reports that Mitch's daddy-in-law was on the payroll of the Chinese shipping company Costco, no, not to be confused with that big old box store. What's the long view? What's China's long play in this? Well, I've got a couple of thoughts, and I'd love to hear yours too. 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. It is coming up on 10 minutes till 10. It's JD Hayworth on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Got stop-and-go traffic north of downtown. It's going to be 24 eastbound between New Hope and Whites Creek Pike. That's right there in Jolton. And then closer to downtown, you got 40 westbound at the International Airport. The right shoulder is blocked by a crash. So if you have a flight to catch and you thought you had a little bit of time before getting to the airport, you better get on the way. But do it safely. A former prominent USA gymnastics doctor convicted of sex abuse has been attacked in prison. These stories and more coming up at 10 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
And when you hear the tone, beep, that means in 3 minutes' time you'll hear more from Brother Ken. Hey, just one clarification, K-Dubs.
Yes, Brother JD.
The crash, I think in the context you made it clear, it was a car crash, a vehicle crash on the way to the airport. We don't want any nervous flyers to be
Goodness, I didn't
extra
even
nervous.
think of that. Yes, it is a car crash.
I knew it was, and it just gave us a chance to engage in witty repartee. And I thank you so much for answering my inquiry and making me feel like a smart guy, Ken. It's a wonderful thing, pal, and we'll hear the other tough headlines from you in a couple of minutes' time. Thank
All right,
you,
brother.
You bet, man. Well, following the news, we bring it back home, y'all. Since it's mid-morning in mid-Tennessee, we're going to talk about what those in the state Senate are talking about now that a federal judge says that portions of the it's not a convenient title. People love the shorthand, the drag ban, I should say. It's a age-appropriate protections for drag queen shows, but that's a mouthful. Anyway, no surprise, somebody on the left says it's just the whole thing, the law itself is hateful. And somebody on the right, not just somebody, the Senate Republican leader says, we're going to keep on this thing. And I happen to think he's right. That is coming up following news. Now, just one thought. If you can't see by now, and this is the thing, if there is one frustration I had during my time in Congress, was that on the morning of September 12th, 2001, we did not seal our borders. And now the Chinese are coming through. Well, hey, old Joe, he and Hunter on the payroll, they're trying to make things easy for the Chi-Coms and tougher on you and me. Much more to come. In fact, we'll answer a question from Stephen A. That's coming up. He got to me on LinkedIn. So all that and lots more fun as we continue. Stay tuned.
Ten o'clock on the dot this Monday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories, and things are still stop and go through Jolton if you're eastbound 24. Then you got that crash near the airport. The right shoulder is blocked, 40 westbound. Full forecast in 2 minutes. A disgraced former USA gymnastics doctor convicted of sex abuse has been attacked in a federal prison.
Larry Nassar, convicted of state and federal charges for sexually assaulting members of the USA gymnastics team, was assaulted and stabbed in prison, sources tell ABC News. He's said to be in stable condition. A statement from the Federal Bureau of Prisons says it happened Sunday afternoon and that Nassar was initially given life-saving aid on site and then transported by EMS to a hospital. Nassar is serving multiple life sentences, which total hundreds of years after more than 300 girls and women came forward, including Olympians Allie Raceman and Simone Biles, accusing the former Michigan State University sports doctor of sexually abusing them.
That's Derek Dennis reporting. Right now in Middle Tennessee, Franklin police are working to identify all of the kids detectives say a soccer coach drugged and raped and then recorded. Channel 4's Amanda Harris says 63-year-old Camila Hurtado Campos is in custody with charges piling up after leaving something behind at a restaurant on June 22nd.
Well, Franklin police say that a restaurant contacted them after finding the videos on a phone that had been left behind by a customer.
Now, police say Campos had recorded himself raping unconscious boys between the ages of 9 and 17 over the course of 20 years. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Already hour number 2 of the program that I immodestly consider second to none. Recovering United States Congressman JD Hayworth with you for middays in mid-Tennessee, or I'll just call it that mid-morning thing. At any rate, promised you see, as a recovering congressman, I keep my promises. I told you I would turn the focus back home to the volunteer state, and sure enough, there was news just prior to the weekend. A federal judge striking down the Tennessee statute duly passed by both houses of the state legislature and signed into law by Governor Lee that was simply saying, look, drag queen shows should be age appropriate. I've made the case to you before about different drinking establishments. And I've said that you don't see little kids sidle up to the bar and order a PBR or anything except a Coors Light, of course, and then swill it down. Why? Well, there are rules, there are laws against it. But, well, as predictable as the Swallows returning to San Juan Capistrano, or more appropriately, the Buzzards going back to Hinckley, Ohio. ABC2 caught up with Democrat State Senator Heidi Campbell. And you see, in Heidi's view, why it's not so much that the law was unconstitutional, she calls it hateful. Take a listen to Cut 7.
The law is obviously meant just to be hateful because the obscenity statute already covers this. And so what it's really done is had a chilling effect on our LGBTQ community and our wonderful, vibrant drag community.
Hey, Heidi, how about our wonderful, vibrant, innocent children? I thought the slogan from the left, it sure was when I went to Congress. The slogan from the left we always hear is, "It's for the children." Well, maybe the Dems are using that chorus differently these days. It's for the children. Really? Oh, there's another reason that State Senator Heidi Campbell characterizes the law as hateful. You see, the next inflection point on the left is to make your thought, this was the problem with so-called hate crimes. And it's kind of interesting that Heidi is saying, well, hey, the obscenity statute is already in there. Why do they do this law? A chilling effect. Well, that's kind of curious, because the argument against hate laws were these. How do you... Murder is murder. An element of hatred, or at the very least, in any crime, there is a measure of contempt. Is there not? But see, if they can get this, and they have the leftist judges, well, this is hateful, and this is an acceptable limitation on speech because it's driven by hate. You know what would really be nice? And I'm not one who wants to change the Constitution at the drop of a hat, but should we add an 11th right to the U.S. Constitution? Children shall have the right to their innocence. Instead of seeing all the designs and all the tactics to sexualize little children, to confuse them, to cajole them, to persuade them that the bodies and the identities and the unique part of who they are somehow is just not right, and wouldn't they feel better changing all of that up? And if you think this is an abstraction, news this morning, Breitbart leads with it. Even Drudge puts it up today in a pre-headline at the top of the page. 40% of Brown University students, that's the school in Providence, Rhode Island, the Ivy League school, 40% of the Brown student body identifies as, now Breitbart has put in the acronym that is growing larger pretty soon. Well, it kind of reminds me, not in terms of orientation, but in terms of just a buffet of letters. Baseball fans may remember that years ago there was a young third baseman who burst on the scene for the Dodgers, Billy Grabarkowitz. And so people just took to calling him Billy Alphabet because Grabarkowitz was tough to spell and for some folks to say. But the headline at Breitbart reads, report, 40% of Brown University students identify as LGBTQIAAP2S+. Can I let you in on the whole notion of why the acronym is used? It's not for convenience. It's for camouflage. Wasn't so long ago that these acts, well, in fact, it's in the news this morning, and I'm sure Ken will have an update at the bottom of the hour what's gone on in Franklin with a soccer coach and the alleged drugging of young soccer players, and let's go ahead and call it what it is, the sodomizing of young boys. Used to call that crimes against nature. They're still on the books, but guess what? When you go to an acronym, it's to camouflage the acts and to somehow, well, with just a group of letters, it doesn't make, it's just not that objectionable. So, wow, I just thought of an acronym a lot of parents might use being outraged at all this hoo-ha, as in WTF. No, this is WTN. At any rate, let's get to the Republican State Senate leader, Jack Johnson. He's the guy who introduced the legislation that the federal judge said it's unconstitutional in this portion. But Leader Johnson says he'll introduce similar legislation again and again and figure a way to pass constitutional muster should this federal court ban on the ban stay in place. This is Cut 8.
Any year I'm up here, I will continue to file this legislation, and I'll continue to fight for kids and to protect them from this type of grotesque, sexually explicit entertainment.
Yeah, this is not, and this is the thing that is so frustrating. This notion that liberty invites licentiousness. This notion that somehow it's enlightened to have drag queen story hour. Stop and think what's going on here. What First Amendment protections? Let me explain why. Now, I used, the laws on the books. We've cited laws on the books, a reason the youth soccer coach in Franklin sitting in the slammer. But Jack Johnson is right here. The First Amendment doesn't cover the people in California or anywhere else dropping trowel and taking a crap in the street. The First Amendment doesn't cover guys doing number one on the sidewalk. And you cannot argue that that bodily function is like the way I register my protest, man. No. You are violating societal norms. You are indecently exposing oneself, and you are exposing a health hazard to the greater public and the greater good when you decide to evacuate your bowels on the sidewalk. It's not going to hold up in court any more than, yeah, I just thought I'd have some fun, so I was at the concert the other night. I just started yelling fire, and man, look at all the people that got trampled to death. Man, that was just great. Doesn't work that way. Now, traditionally, the argument is the best way to counter objectionable speech is with more speech. And while that is true in a great majority of the cases, there are times in the public square when you have to say, hold on there a second, Baba Louie. This ain't for little children to be hearing. But if you eliminate values in a society, if you eliminate, dare we call it, morality in a society, if you eliminate civility in a society, and understand civility is not like, although I thought it was an ingenious cartoon. The Warner Brothers characters, they completely misnamed them. This is one case where alliteration didn't really fit. They called them the Goofy Gophers. They would have been better off naming the Gopher duo, they would have been better off naming them the Erudite Rodents. Because their language was, they would lay waste to a farm, and they go, let's try those radishes after you. No, after you. And they would lay waste to the farm, eating all the crops. Those radishes are ravishing, simply delightful. Oh, yes. Bonus question to Millennial Mac, listening no doubt with a mixture of dread, interest, and curiosity. Do you know the name that Warner Brothers came within a hair's breadth, of naming Bugs Bunny?
I actually have no clue, no.
Let us give thanks they turned to alliteration in that case, because Bugs Bunny was almost named the Happy Rabbit. Not Happy the Rabbit.
Just
or there
Happy
was a
Rabbit.
character, Oswald the Rabbit, but no. And thankfully, somebody said, wait a minute, Bugs Bunny works. Yeah, what's up? I mean, that is, the great thing about Bugs Bunny is that unlike other heroes of cartoon fame, Bugs, occasionally he'll end up on the short end of the stick, but he's always coming back, and he's the guy who's street smart, and he's the guy in control of every situation. Why, I think there may be a self-help book in this, although I'm sure the Warner Brothers lawyers would be on the phone. You should say, the Bugs Bunny remedy for what's bugging you, because it's only a moment when he has trouble. I knew I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque, and he ends up, there's Yosemite saying, say your prayers, Rabbit. And he always has a way to overcome
It's
it.
true.
Or so it seems. I mean, like when the Tasmanian devil shows up, and he thinks he suckered him. What a maroon, what a dolt. And here, why for you bury me in the cold, cold ground? He gets that fixed up. by getting the Tasmanian devil a bride. Oh, I guess they couldn't do this cartoon anymore. Remember, he gets the air freight to bring from Tasmania a devil tress. And Bugs wears the collar. I didn't know, maybe he'd gotten a mail order ordination as a reverend, but there he is in the collar. I now pronounce you devil and devil tress, and clears out. Now, granted, not everything is that simple, but it's that attitude that Bugs brings. A little thought about the wit and wisdom of yon animation. No, not that anime those folks over there in Japan do, just animation. When we come back, free speech in Tennessee and fried chicken? Well, something like it.
Still slow going in Cheatham County, 24 eastbound now between Springfield, Ashland City, exit 24, and the Cheatham-Davidson County line. That is stop-and-go traffic. There's been a security breach at a Nashville healthcare company. We'll give you the details at 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
And 10:30, less than 4 minutes away. But time for me to talk, and look, I am not directing this at a fine sponsor because I happen to hear the spot a little earlier in one of our a little broadcast lingo for you, one of our stop sets, one of our breaks from the Tennessean. Now, I'm not sure if the lady to whom the byline belongs, I'm not sure if it's Angela, but spelled with an E at the end, or Angela. And anyway, Ms. Latham wrote the story. Free chicken and free speech group to launch First Amendment ad campaign in Nashville. Hot chicken and hot takes will be combined Wednesday as the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE, that would be the acronym, FIRE, launches its expansion campaign into Nashville, giving away 1,791 free hot chicken sandwiches to celebrate the 1791 ratification of the First Amendment. And Millennial Mac, no sooner do I read this with free association with Looney Tunes, I think about the classic Chuck Jones directed Looney Tune without any of the big name stars. It was, I guess, just a one-off. It was entitled One Froggy Evening. And I don't know if you remember the plot of this thing, but Acme Demolition is coming in and taking down a building. And the guy in charge with opening the cornerstone sees a box there, and he opens it up, and there's a frog who sings all these hits of the 1890s. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. And the demo guy looks to the camera, and he has these dollar signs. So he thinks he's going to take this frog and have the frog exercise his First Amendment rights to sing. And he rents a theater, and he puts singing frog, come in. Then he puts free. And then finally, what prompts the crowd to show up is he puts up a sign, free beer, and then suddenly the place is full. So the whole deal is when the curtain is lifted, the frog just sits there. And finally, the poor guy takes him down to a building site. There's another building going up, and he puts the frog in the cornerstone. Fast forward to the 21st century, when we were all supposed to be wearing like spacesuits and stuff. And there's a building disintegration thing now instead of demolition. And the man in the 21st century, hey, we're here now, come to think of it. Anyway, he opens up, there's the box, and there's the frog again, and the whole cycle starts over. So, as my old buddy from North Carolina with whom I served in the Congress, Howard Coble might say, they gonna be giving away hot chicken in support of the First Amendment? Well, regardless of their political orientations, good on them. And so Wednesday, and you can hear the ad right here on many of this same station, and probably see the TV spots. Now, you look behind the curtain and you see these guys are leaning to the left, but okay. Why, they have a right to express themselves too. And we have the right to point out where they're wrong. When we come back, an inquiry via social media on LinkedIn, Stephen A. reaches out. Stephen A's got some good questions for me, and it will be a springboard to discussion. That's coming up right now. Stand by for news.
10:30 on the dot this Monday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. And it's slow going on 24 if you're eastbound in Cheatham County. Stop and go traffic 24 eastbound. This between Springfield, Ashland City Highway, and the Cheatham-Davidson County line. Security breach at a Nashville healthcare company. Channel 4 says HCA Healthcare says patient information was unintentionally released, but only patient names, zip codes, and emails went on an online portal. HCA, or forum, I should say. HCA says the breach does not include diagnosis, treatment, credit card numbers, social security numbers, driver's licenses, or passwords. They're just trying to figure out how that information got out and who put it there. And right now in Middle Tennessee, a Franklin soccer coach accused of drugging and raping kids and recording it all. Police say they arrested 63-year-old Camila Hurtado Campos on June 23rd after he left his cell phone at a restaurant. When workers were trying to learn more about the phone's owner, it opened, they saw what was on it, and called police. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
One of the big words being thrown around in the investing world right now is this one. You may have heard it. Fiduciary. The idea that the investment advisor has to keep your interest first when they give advice. Now, it's being used in a marketing sense right now, and one of the things that I found fascinating, there was a study by the University of Southern California and Indiana University. They looked at investment advisor portfolios and they found that they were making basic academic mistakes in the management of their own portfolios. And the question that they asked was, if they can't even keep their own best interest first, how are they going to keep your best interest first? That was the question. Now, one of the things that we do at Paul Winkler Inc. is every one of our offices, 10 offices, is run by a degreed planner, number one. But we go way beyond the call of duty when it comes to fiduciary and making sure that we're using academically sound principles in investing. Evidence-based. In other words, a lot of this is backed by Nobel Prize winning research. To learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
24 minutes till 11. In our final hour, a follow-up from Friday. The fugitive witness, Dr. Guy Luft, or what I heard him on the video obtained by the New York Post from parts unknown, sounded to me like he was saying Dr. Guy Luft. At any rate, an update on what's going on with that story, that and more, in our final hour on this Monday. Now, I told you heading into the news break, in fact, I've referenced it a couple of times, that via social media, LinkedIn, Stephen A. Had really good questions, and we've had a little more of a conversation. In fact, I even got an update from Stephen A. No doubt he listens rather closely, rather critically in a good way. And he points out, this was great because I talked about FIRE, the First Amendment guys coming in to give away those free chicken sandwiches starting at Wednesday at 11 a.m. And in fact, they're advertising on many of this same station and other broadcast outlets in Music City. So the last thing I'll get to Stephen's questions in a second, but I just have to point out how situationally aware Stephen A. is. Would be honored if you mentioned I'm host of Mill Creek View, Tennessee podcast, and then parentheses, a WTN advertiser. Well, by all means, that's why I led my reference, Stephen A., with your status there with the Mill Creek, Tennessee podcast. And Stephen A. checks in. His original interrogative for moi: why did the Freedom Caucus guys and gals let Kevin McCarthy off the hook from their demands before he was voted into Speaker? And Stephen's really concerned about impeachment and investigations. Well, let's see. How many ballots did it take? They did have K-Mac sweating bullets, but in a legislative situation, when you have a narrow majority, governing is hard work. It is very tough. And so to answer Stephen A.'s question, and you may be wondering this too, gee, it seems like Kevin McCarthy's kind of taken his foot off the gas pedal when it comes to impeachment of Dodder and Joe or others who are committing high crimes and misdemeanors. I think of the bald-headed rat who runs the Department of Homeland Security, who's actively involved in trying to erase our border. And, of course, last hour we talked about the influx of suspected Chinese military men coming in. Gee, isn't that just special? So here's what happens. You get into those negotiations. And really, if you're a member of Congress, you come to understand how difficult it is to maintain a majority. And no doubt K-Mac on about the next to last ballot said, guys, look, let me have a little room. I tell you what, I will never, ever do. I will not do what Smokin' John Boehner and Lion Paul Ryan did. If we're going to pass something in the House, it will have a majority of the majority party of Republicans. You may not agree with it, but I am not going to go to the Democrats to pass key legislation. And in the case of raising the debt ceiling, that's exactly how it went down. A lot of my buddies, guys I agree with, were raising HE double hockey sticks. But in the final analysis, K-Mac was able to go to the committee chairs and members of his leadership and the whip team and say, look, we got to pass this thing. Now, Newt was out there explaining it, and Newt made sense as well. But I would go into conferences all fired up about something, and Newt would say, yeah, your points are valid. Let me explain the situation as it exists. And at that time, Republicans had the House and the Senate majority, and as when old Slick Willie was down at the White House and indulging in all sorts of hoo-ha behind closed doors, as we found out later, as we suspected at the time. But the point would be made, we do that, and he vetoes it, and in this town, and the way the reporting is, we will get the HE double hockey sticks beaten out of us because the press instantly takes the side of the left 99 and 44 100% of the time, and so you end up losing the issue. So it's better to go into 96, and this really happened. One of the greatest things we got done, and sadly it was the first thing Obama eliminated in his so-called economic stimulus when he first got to the White House, but welfare reform that required work. You had a certain amount of time where you would get unfettered public assistance, and then if you were a person with physical abilities and you had to go get a job. That did not become law until one of the last votes we took in 1996, in the midst of all the conventions and all of that, after the Republican convention, after Bill went over to Chicago and talked about those mean old Republicans, their contract on America. Now let me tell you what I've done, and I'll just happen to mention I signed into law those things that passed, but I won't say it exactly that way. We voted for welfare reform, and Dick Morris tells the story. It's kind of interesting because Dick and I worked together at Newsmax, and we've known each other. Dick's the only guy who, imagine being an advisor to United States Senator Jesse Helms of North Carolina and also Slick Willie. Dick Morris would work both sides of the aisle. And as he explained what he said to Clinton when Hillary calls up and says, you got to come back, we're having real trouble, as Dick Morris told the story in one of his books. So he goes in and he tells Clinton, hey, Mr. President, look, Americans may not know that much about welfare reform, but they understand baseball. Republicans have sent this bill to you twice and you vetoed it. The polling is at 80%. The American people get it. We're a compassionate people, but we also think the best social program is having a job. So don't veto it a third time. Now, Hillary and her pal Marion Wright Edelman from the Children's Defense Fund, remember, it's all about the children. They couldn't stand it. And Clinton comes out with this hoo-ha story about, I turned down that bill the first time and the second time because there were no protections for children and for the vulnerable community in that legislation. The Republicans have changed that bill, so now I'm willing to sign it. That was yet another presidential prevarication. There was nothing that had been changed in that legislation one iota. But boy, the press, being cheerleaders for the left, they go, uh-huh, and they dutifully pass that along and give Clinton a little wiggle room. Now, you can argue that basically we took poor old Bob Dole, and after that, after we had the agreement on welfare reform, Dole's presidential campaign was essentially deep-sixed. I don't know if it was quite that simple a thing, but we made a decision in the House with the help of Bob Dole's Senate. See, the difference is right now, there's no majority Aside from the narrow House Republican majority, you got the Dems in charge of the Senate and in charge of the White House. So there's no way to make it wiggle. Now, Stephen A. talks about, he says erasing the debt limit dooms us. I'm not entirely sure, Stephen A., we completely erased it. I understand what you're saying. But look, the die was cast. When little Fauci came out, the capo of contagion, look, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That's all we're saying. It turned into 2 years. And no, I don't think COVID was a hoax. I think it was manipulated. I think that Fauci sent money to help the Chinese come up with essentially what was a bioweapon. I think they're still looking for one. And not only do we have the experience at WTN of our late friend Phil Valentine. I lost my daddy to COVID. Let's understand what that was. It was a bioweapon unleashed on the world. And the Chi-Coms, being a communist dictatorship, oh yeah, they may like business. But going back to the first hour's topic, what the Chinese have, it's not a free market. It is a martial market, M-A-R-T-I-A-L, where everything they bring from outside, they see, how can we give it a military application? And oh yeah, if you're going to come do business in China, a little matter of controlling interest. The Chi-Coms want 51% at least. They got to control the entity. Boy, for Marxists, they sure understand money. It's not like, oh, wow, let's just share this. We'll share things. And we have been naive about all this hoo-ha. Yeah, we'll get them involved in free commerce, in the free market system. Nah, didn't work that way. And I think I told you before, one of the other big mistakes we made when I was in Congress, we allowed Silicon Valley, we allowed the internet to remain tax-free. What did all those mega billionaires do? Well, suddenly they forgot about being Americans first. Fast forward to the last election, Google imported, 13 Chinese censors to show them how to bury the algorithms to basically take conservative candidates off the search or make it where you got to search really hard and all sorts of other censorship tricks. Now, I appreciate what Stephen A. is telling me about the debt ceiling, and I don't want to give that short shrift. So I will tell you what, I will take a deeper, closer look at that. Both, most importantly, how it relates to you and me and our family budget, where we don't get to run annual deficits, but also the implications for the country. That side of, well, the dark and darker side of burgeoning debt when we come back. It's 10 minutes till 11. Recovering Congressman JD Hayworth, Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Got a crash. It looks like blocking the right lane. The left lane is open, but the right lane is blocked. This is going to be 40 westbound right before Spence Lane here in Nashville. Then in Cheatham County, still stop and go traffic 24 eastbound in between Springfield, Ashland City, and the Cheatham-Davidson County line. Security breach at a Nashville healthcare company. We'll tell you what the company has to say coming up at 11 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
And 11 a.m. is a little less than 2 minutes and 30 seconds away. Brother Ken with those headlines and more. Interesting use of the term crash. Now, here's the bottom line with our burgeoning debt. Everything is okay until suddenly it isn't. Because any economy is built on confidence and the value of currency. When we departed the gold standard, when we let the value of our money be set essentially by bureaucratic fiat, by the Federal Reserve, we have put in place a ticking time bomb. It'd be like turning your stove on full throttle and not cooking a thing, but just walking out. And no, I'm not for banning gas stoves. I'm simply saying these things have to be dealt with carefully. When you just go, oh, hey, the answer that Biden and his buddy, hey, we'll just print more money. Just we'll go to printing and engraving. When you do that, when you flood the marketplace with Benjamins, guess what? Oh, the government spends more money, but the money in circulation is worth less. Remember what opened the door for Hitler in post-war Germany. The Weimar Republic, to buy a loaf of bread, took a wheelbarrow of Deutschmarks. Boy, and the way they'll try to shield it's coming up later this month. It'll be with, using electronic money rather than cash. Stick with cash. It's not a four-letter word. Hour 3 is straight ahead. It's JD on WTN.
$11 o'clock on the dot this Monday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Full forecast in 2 minutes. We got a security breach at a Nashville healthcare company. HCA says an unauthorized party put information about patients on an online forum. Channel 4 says that information released includes patient names, zip codes, and emails, but no clinical information such as passwords, credit card numbers, driver's licenses, diagnosis, or treatments. Everyone Generation X and older will remember the infamous Tylenol murders of 1982. Well, now comes word the only person to face criminal charges for it has died. 76-year-old James Lewis found dead in his Massachusetts home over the weekend. Here's Stephanie Wade in Chicago.
In a jailhouse interview, he once explained an intricate scheme that the killer would have used to fill the Tylenol capsules with deadly cyanide using a drilled pegboard, but always denied he was the one who actually did it. Most investigators never believed him and considered Lewis the one and only suspect in the 7 Chicago area Tylenol murders, but he was never charged with the actual killings.
A former USA gymnastics doctor convicted of sex abuse is reportedly in stable condition after getting attacked in prison. Larry Nassar was stabbed multiple times by another inmate at a Florida prison yesterday, according to a statement from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Nassar is serving multiple life sentences after more than 300 girls and women came forward and accused the former Michigan State University sports doctor of sexually abusing them under the guise of medical treatment. And right now in Tennessee, the state can enforce the total ban on transgender care for minors after the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals put an injunction Saturday on a lower court's ruling that blocked part of the law. Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti telling WTN's Nashville's Morning News, this is the first federal court ruling in favor of such a law, and the injunction's only temporary.
And if the Court of Appeals says that there's no constitutional issue here, that the Constitution does allow the legislature to do this, I think that probably probably determines the outcome of the case at that point.
We could find out if anything changes by mid-October. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Coming up on 5 minutes past 11 Central Daylight Time, final hour of this WTN Mid-Tennessee Midday Thing. I will return Thursday on many of this same station. In the interim, whomever may be behind this microphone, please tip generously. Well, that could be a topic. But unfortunately, not all the news is, well, this has not been a real happy show in terms of the headlines and what is happening both at home and abroad. Our follow-up from Friday, and again, a tip of the rhetorical cap to Millennial Mac, doing great work with the volume of calls on Friday for Mouth Off to Mid-Tennessee. Mouth Off was actually Mouth Off to Music City, and by extension, Mid-Tennessee. And, you know, Mac, it was interesting. We got a call. I think a lady was checking on my marital status, which was kind of interesting, and I was happy to report that sweet and petite Miss Mary still keeps me in line, but that was a little interesting. I did promote my ruggedly handsome little brother, who has never wed, but has a healthy interest in what we used to call the fairer sex. I guess we can still say that. And old Philip Hayworth, he is something. He is a national champion dog trainer, and his first national champion was back in 1986, and The NRA used to put the dog of the year, the field trial dog of the year, they do a painting, and that would be the illustration on the NRA calendar for hunters. And so my little brother trained this dog, Johnny Walker Black. No, the canine was not allowed to imbibe the beverage for which he was named, but some kind of dog, and it was just kind of interesting to get those calls on Friday. But we began the show Friday with what we're going to talk about now, and that is the story that the rest of the cable networks finally got to, or at least Fox got to. I think everybody else, your standard alphabets and then their cable cousins, MSNBC, which stands for Make Up Stuff and Never Believe Conservatives, and CNN, Conservatives Know Never, they didn't do much on this story. It is the story of a fugitive witness, a resident of Israel, I believe a one-time officer in the Israeli Defense Forces. His name, Dr. Guy Luft, as he pronounces it. And he went to the FBI and the DOJ, almost a year before the Hunter Biden laptop dropped into the FBI's lap. And what Dr. Guy Luft said was that, hey, you need to know this about Joe Biden if he's going to run for president, because the CEFC, that Chinese energy company, I've seen how they've paid off Hunter Biden and Joe's brother, and this can't be good. So the FBI and the DOJ, and this is back when Trump was president, but it shows you how powerful a bureaucracy can be. It also shows you how minions of the left burrow in. You know, I think it was Mark Twain had the joke, suppose you're an idiot, suppose you're a member of Congress, but I repeat myself. You might say, that applies to you, JD. Well, there's another little expression we could use. Suppose you're a bureaucrat, suppose you're a Democrat, but I repeat myself because that's the way it works in Washington. It's the city where the industry is government. So those on the left who always want to grow government, they have a whole lot of support within the environs of the District of Columbia. Anyway, on Capitol Hill, folks wanted to hear from Dr. Luft, but wouldn't you know, after the FBI and the DOJ, let's see, they sent 2 prosecutors from the Southern District of New York, that would be Midtown Manhattan, the guys always going after Trump. They sent 2 prosecutors from that jurisdiction and 4 FBI agents, and one of those FBI agents was the guy, since he operates out of Baltimore, and Baltimore doubles as the city, the field office for the FBI in Delaware. Well, one of the FBI agents sent to interview Dr. Guy Luft in Brussels in an intensive 2-day interrogation is what it was. That same FBI guy was the guy who picked up Hunter Biden's laptop. And of course, it disappeared into a dark hole. If it weren't for the fix-it shop owner making a copy, the world would have never known. And the fix was in for the Biden. So here is Dr. Guy Luft telling you in a tape that was prepared at an undisclosed location and appeared Friday on the website of the New York Post. Here is Dr. Guy Luft basically telling you, your DOJ, it seems like it's Department of Obstruction of Justice, and your FBI, well, just a federal bureaucracy of inertia. Take a listen to Cut 9.
In other words, the FBI knew about, from me, about the Biden CFC deals before they got hold of the laptop, way before. They had enough time to investigate the issue, but they didn't.
And now you better believe that the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, Representative James Comer, who chairs the Government Oversight Committee in the House, boy, he wants to hear from Dr. Luft. And so a gentleman from the Senate side, it's always interesting. Well, yeah, Comer, committee chairs in the House show up on Sunday shows, but always and forever you seem to see U.S. senators. Ron Johnson, all-around good guy, Senator Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin, says that Dr. Guy Luft needs to be granted immunity so he can come testify on Capitol Hill, because think of this. When he's finally picked up, I guess by these same feds who bottled up the info, when he's arrested for alleged deal over weapons, munitions, some sort of hoo-ha, our Justice Department does not try to get him in Israel when that's his residence and their extradition treaties. No, they wait to go to Cyprus and try to bring the guy in, and he's gotten away. So yes, he is a fugitive, but he is a fugitive with a story that needs to be heard. So Ron Johnson spells it out here in Cut number 10.
Got a wealth of information, but they never followed up on that meeting. Instead, they arrested him in Cyprus to silence him. They could have gone to Israel. He resides in Israel. We have extradition treaties, but they instead arrest him in Cyprus. Now, he's literally fleeing for his life right now. He's on the run. He's an important witness. He needs to be granted immunity to be able to testify and tell his story.
Yeah, we need to get that story. Oh, the other thing you always hear from the press about political candidates, except Biden, of course, follow the money. Well, that's kind of interesting, too. Again, Senator Ron Johnson on Sunday Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo on Fox, he offers a quick analysis comparing and contrasting the money spent thus far by Special Counsel Jack Smith, who is going after Donald John Trump, hammer and tongs, and Robert Hur, the independent counsel allegedly investigating Joe Biden. Take a listen to the discrepancies between the amounts of money being spent by the guy trying to bring in Trump and the other guy who is suspected of simply going through the motions. This is Cut 11.
Now you've got Jack Smith. In a few months, has spent $5.5 million. Robert Hur, who's investigating Biden's classified documents, spent $616,000. So when you just see the resources and effort put behind targeting Republicans or Donald Trump versus what little resources and how corrupt and unthorough the investigations are against Democrats, it's pretty revealing.
Yes, it is, Ron Johnson. It is pretty revealing, and it's something else. What the left is trying to do is to criminalize politics. And a guy who is still a liberal, a lot of people call folks on the left liberals, not any longer. These people do not believe in free speech for everybody. They talk all about diversity, but it's to check a box. It is not welcoming diversity of thought. And so you've got a situation that has developed that is deteriorating and fraying the fabric of American society And the death knell comes when you have power and you decide to take that power and criminalize your opponent. Criminalize those who disagree with you, who provide opposition. Now, what we are in danger of seeing in the United States, the ancients called it civic virtue. We are about to kiss civic virtue goodbye, because a whole lot of curious occurrences with the tabulation of votes. And look, we have known for years that there are certain enclaves, certain geographical political subdivisions where election day hijinks and both vote buying and vote manufacturing has gone on for a long time. But as one Chicagoan explained it to me, there in the land of Lincoln, both parties indulge in these things or have been known to. And so both parties give some credence to the notion that, quote, hey, we stole that one fair and square. And most of the time it's grin and bear it and then get ready and come back for the next election. But there was so much in-your-face stuff in 2020 and in my home state of Arizona, which I saw with my own eyes, that you're kind of going, hey, wait a minute here. Why does it take so long to tabulate votes now? And a whole lot of curiosities. And I pointed out to you that it's really funny about the left. They'll ridicule something until they go, wait a minute. We can make that work for us. And so back in 2012, the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University, remember ASU is USA spelled backwards, in conjunction with the Knight Pulliam Foundation and who else was in on that? Oh, NBC News. And the Knight Foundation, the Pulliam's got another thing going. That's Dan Quayle's granddaddy. The Knight Foundation started financing investigative stories. And in 2012, the ASU J School guys, in conjunction with NBC News, easiest way to commit vote fraud, vote by mail. And boy, it has opened up a can of worms. But basically, what is happening now is Biden and his bunch want to criminalize the political opposition. Mighty dang dangerous. When we come back, forget the three faces of Eve, it's the two faces of old Joe. 11:20, JD on WTN.
Still stop and go traffic through Cheatham County. Pleasant View, to be precise, 24 eastbound. And then closer to downtown, you got a crash blocking the right lane of 40 westbound right before Spence Lane. And we've had a data breach affecting a Nashville healthcare company. We'll tell you what they're saying about what kind of information was put out there. Coming up at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Now, Kenny, did I hear that right? Pleasant View?
Pleasant View.
Well, if you're listening in Pleasant View, we hope you have a pleasurable listen, as the view kind of has you stuck. Wherever you may be, happy to have you here. And Ken will have news for you in less than 5 minutes at 11:30. And we wait with great interest, Brother Ken, and thank you very much. Now, here comes a story. Love the headline. It comes from Axios, not exactly known as a conservative source. A few more thoughts on that in just a minute. Old Yeller, Biden's private fury. And it says, in public, President Biden likes to whisper to make a point. In private, he's prone to yelling. Behind closed doors, yeah, behind closed doors, old Joe has such a quick trigger temper that some aides tried to avoid meeting alone with him. The president's admonitions include G. Diet. How the F don't you know this? Don't effing bull bleep me and get the F out of here. Why it matters. Now this is the payoff.
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true.
Why it matters. The private eruptions paint a more complicated picture of Biden as a manager and president than his carefully cultivated image as a kindly uncle who loves aviator sunglasses and ice cream. No, it doesn't. That's not a carefully cultivated image. We know he shouts. I would refer you to the speech last September when Independence Hall in Philadelphia was lit up blood red, and old Biden stands there shouting at the top of his lungs. But here comes the payoff. It's saying that Ted Kaufman, old Joe's longtime chief of staff when the future president represented Delaware in the Senate, told Axios that Biden's process is policy-driven and has made him a strong executive. Yeah, this is complete garbage. This is where they are planting a story, and the whole notion is that, well, Joe, he is absolutely in control. He fact-checks his staff. He blows up when they fail to give him a complete brief. And this is absolute horse pucky. Oh, gosh. Some administration officials, many of whom went to elite schools, struggle with Biden's demand to ditch wonky, acronym-filled language and brief him as if they were talking to a close family member who isn't in the D.C. bubble. Oh, so that's the angle. So this is really old Joe, and his foul-talking persona is that of a decisive executive who wants people to explain things thoroughly. He calls them out when there are some problems in the presentation.
Where am I? What's going to happen to me?
Well, exactly. See, there is Joe. There is no way to dress up this hoo-ha. You know, when I was a kid, my first visit to Washington one summer in the driving distance between High Point, North Carolina, our nation's capital, was not that great. We're driving home after a week there, and I mean, it was a fabulous week. And my parents, God bless them, instilled us with a great gift that we could do anything anything in America if we set our minds to it and worked hard. And we're coming back home and we're talking about Washington. And since they were kids, primary school kids in World War II, and FDR had been president the year they were born, 1932, FDR became president, and he was in that gig until they were out of the sixth grade, or the spring of the sixth grade. They said, man, the way they kept FDR's illnesses from us, well, they could never do that in the television age. Excuse me, it has happened. This collective media is not shining a light. It is complicit in the cover-up of the senility of the guy who history will remember, for better or worse, as the 46th President of the United States. And no, I don't know how to translate that into Mandarin Chinese. When we come back, that horrible crime story from close to home. It's JD, it's Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I did what I came to do.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Full forecast in 2 minutes. Data breach at a Nashville healthcare company. Channel 4 says HCA reported an unauthorized party put patient information on an online forum, and HCA is now working to identify the person or persons responsible. HCA says the information was patient names, birthdays, what state or city they live in, telephone numbers, but no one's credit card numbers, health problems, driver's licenses, or social security numbers were released. Former USA Gymnastics Dr. Larry Nassar serving several life sentences after 300 girls and women came forward about being sexually abused is reportedly in stable condition after getting stabbed at the federal prison in Florida where he is incarcerated. And here in Tennessee, a Franklin soccer coach accused of drugging and raping kids, then recording it all. Camilo Hurtado Campos, 63 years old, was arrested on June 23rd after he left his cell phone at a restaurant and workers discovered the images when they opened the phone to learn about the owner so they could return it. They called police instead. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
One of the big words being thrown around in the investing world right now is this one. You may have heard it. Fiduciary. The idea that the investment advisor has to keep your interest first when they give advice. Now, it's being used in a marketing sense right now, and one of the things that I found fascinating, there was a study by the University of Southern California and Indiana University. They looked at investment advisor portfolios and they found that they were making basic academic mistakes in the management of their own portfolios. And the question that they asked was, if they can't even keep their own best interest first, how are they going to keep your best interest first? That was the question. Now, one of the things that we do at Paul Winkler Inc. is every one of our offices, 10 offices, is run by a degreed planner, number one. But we go way beyond the call of duty when it comes to fiduciary and making sure that we're using academically sound principles in investing. Evidence-based. In other words, it's backed by a lot of this is backed by Nobel Prize winning research. To learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
Well, here we are back again, headed down the proverbial home stretch. And, Mac, there must have been I did not read this until right now, but we were doing that kind of litany of Looney Tunes.
Ah, yes.
Well, on this date, and I'm trying to remember how many years ago it transpired. Well, in fact, I see it now. July 10th, 1989, at the age of 81, Mel Blanc passed away.
Oh, wow.
And he was the guy, Bugs Bunny, all the different voices.
Mm-hmm.
And he was something. Now, it's kind of interesting. Mel Blanc went to Warner Brothers time and again saying, let me handle some of these vocal characterizations. One night, he was on The Tonight Show so long ago, still The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. And he says to John, he says, yeah, I kept going to Warner Brothers and saying, hey, look, I'd love to try these voices for you. And this guy wouldn't let me do it. And Carson says, how did you convince the guy? He said, well, it was a little different. That guy died, and the next guy gave me a chance. So not that we would ever wish that on those who might not properly appreciate our talents, but it happens sometimes out there. There we have it. Great stuff. That was the Porky Pig voice. It was just great. We tried to say, I got to talk, not only the That's All Folks thing, he'd say, I got to talk to my friends, and do that whole bit. Great stuff. And of course, little Tweety Bird. I thought, put it there. Great stuff. The one voice, when he crossed over and did some work for Hanna-Barbera, he was, I think, the first voice of Barney Rubble, or growing up in the South, I called him Barney Rebel. But his Barney was kind of a gravelly, instead of, hey Fred, the second voice. That's the only vocal characterization that Mel Blanc had that I would take exception to, just based on, I think the other voice worked a little better. But then again, that's just me, so what the heck. But we have to do the math. Gosh, 1989, that was quite some time ago that Mel left us. But Variety, now we say here unashamedly, for your advertising dollars, radio is your best option. But when Mel Blanc passed, there was a great print ad that Warner Brothers took out in Variety and a variety, pardon the pun, of other magazines. And it had all the Warner Brothers galaxy of Looney Tunes favorites. And they all have these somber expressions on their faces as they gather around a microphone. And one word, speechless. And then a picture of Mel Blanc. The date of his birth and today's date, his death back in 1989. It's amazing how those cartoons, especially when you see them when you're little and you still appreciate them when you grow up, to the point that it takes this old cynical recovering congressman and chokes him up a little. The next story we're going to talk about, you won't choke up. You may choke on rage. May make you want to throw up, but it's in the news. Ken has covered it all morning. And it's interesting what Nashville's own celebrity producer Robbie Starbuck has tweeted out today. Or actually, I guess this came with the news yesterday when it broke. This is a horrific local story that I need help getting the word out about for local police. A local soccer coach in Franklin, Tennessee, named Camilo Campos, left a phone at a restaurant. It was filled with videos of him raping boys who were unconscious. Many may not realize that they're on these videos. And Robbie Starbuck continues with a tweet after attaching the article. I'm sick over this case. He's held right now on $525,000 bond. Why the HE double hockey sticks, and of course he just uses the word, but I'd rather go HE double hockey sticks, does a child rapist get the chance to bond out of jail when he's on video raping kids? Our penalties for pedophiles are nowhere near adequate in America. They deserve an immediate death penalty. That's what Robbie Starbuck tweeted out yesterday. And my simple question for you, do you agree with that? Here are the exceptions I would make. Understandable revulsion, understandable concern for victims. Yet our society is a republic. What is the cornerstone of a republic? The rule of law. Not simple majority rule. Yes, we express our preferences through voting. Yes, the institution in which I served, the House of Representatives, is the most small d democratic office in our Constitution, where you win by popular vote and you serve for 2 years, and if there is a change in the body politic, well, that makes a change by votes. And so important is the expression of voter sentiment. Every seat in the United States House of Representatives, when it is vacant because of death or resignation, a special election is declared. It's not like the Senate, where different states do different things, where someone can be appointed. Everyone in the United States House of Representatives is elected. And yet, there are other checks and balances. Our founders, and this may sound like heresy to you, since you and I grew up at a time where the term democracy and republic was used interchangeably, but it is not the same thing. The founders were concerned that popular passions would take away the rule of law, and this is why, and I understand Robbie Starbuck's rage as expressed on Twitter. But here you have a right to a trial by jury, and you are presumed innocent until found guilty. That applies to everybody. But to his point about capital punishment for pedophiles, should that be a capital offense? I'm very interested in hearing from you, especially because, and will those on the left start to wail and gnash teeth? We have spent our time for the past few years nationwide, certainly in Hollywood and in the affluent leftist suburbs of America, and down at Disney, where boomers have been replaced by groomers. You've had a situation where suddenly Hey, we got to blur the lines a little bit. Hey. And what is that? Well, they've come up with MAP, another acronym. Minor attracted persons. Like that's not a major offense? This notion that you can blur the lines. I would suggest to you that the report of these crimes from Franklin, Tennessee, as horrible as they are a most timely reminder. A reminder that what I was talking about last hour. I would love the Constitution to stay a document of limited and enumerated powers. But I will tell you that I'm all for an amendment to be attached to the Bill of Rights. Children have the right to innocence. They don't need to be hypersexualized. And this, again, makes the case. If kids can't be safe in youth sports programs, and we've gotten similar, quote, lesson plans in public schools and other schools, what the heck is going on here? It is time to wake up. You're lining up to talk about this. 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. We'll get to a couple of your calls when we return. It's 11:48, 12 minutes till 12 noon. JD on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. 5 minutes till 12 noon. 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. Larry's on the line from Clarksville. Larry, we thank you for taking your time, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. And listen, you're correct. This guy does deserve his day in court. And then if he's convicted, there should be a 22 to each kneecap. There should be a blowtorch and a cordless drill on schedule for him every day, a couple times a day. And then after 6 months, he should be force-fed about a pound of X-Lax and hung upside down naked in the town square.
I think you've given this some thought, Larry, in terms of how to dispatch him. In other words, after a trial by jury, this should be a capital offense. Gotcha.
Yes.
I gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Now,
have a great day, JD.
You too, sir, and thank you for weighing in. Robbie Starbucks tweet, they deserve an immediate death penalty. Well, after the trial, if convicted by a jury of their peers. Now, our friend on the phone, he offered, I never thought I'd come down in that cruel and unusual punishment thing, but I got to tell you, the graphic punishment he expressed that he would like to see probably is not going to pass muster from the cruel and unusual framework of noted jurists. But then again, the argument is, what you talk about cruel and unusual punishment. How many perpetrators have doled out incredibly cruel and unusually brutal punishment on their victims? That's a fair question. Calling in from Franklin on line one, it's Guy. Guy, you get the last word on this.
Man, I got to tell you, I thoroughly enjoyed the last gentleman's detailed description. I think personally we should bring back public hanging. I live in Franklin, and it's very unnerving. I actually drove by the man's house when the Franklin crime scene was going through it on my way home from work, and didn't think of it at the time. Just thought, maybe we had a murder scene. And now to hear this, I was actually watching The Sound of Freedom last night in the movie theater when my wife texted me that.
Wow.
And
of course, we should go ahead and finish. Yes, sir. Very quickly.
I mean, it was heartbreaking. It was gut-wrenching. I was already crying in the movie. And then just to see that and these poor children, I mean. And of
course, that motion picture, we should weigh in for people who may not know, that's the motion picture starring Jim Caviezel. That is about child sex trafficking, and it is incredibly graphic. Guy, I thank you very much for your call. Before you and I part company, we're going to change just so you can leave with a smile on your face. One of the ironies yesterday on MSNBC, Jen Psaki, Raggedy Amnesty, with her show, she had on Gavin Newsom, the leftist waiting for Biden to be cleared out. And gruesome Gavin Newsom, the smiling cobra, tries to authentically claim he's not inauthentic. Listen to this.
At the end of the day, I think the one thing's universal. I hear everywhere else, just people are like, just be authentic. Like, tell me seriously, why are you here?
People can see through it.
They can see through it, and they don't even see it; they feel it, and they feel that inauthenticity. And I think all of us are prone to having people think that we're inauthentic. We're in the business where we're so quick to dismiss.
Hey, pal, you kidding me? You are inauthentic. Smiling Cobra. Mercy, that's it for me today. I will be back Thursday. I'll be a year older when we get together 9 to noon on many of this same station. Stay brave, stay free, stay tuned.